Peregrine, Duke of Norhaven, came round the corner of his own terrace at 10 minutes past midnight and found a young woman halfway out of his bedchamber window, one shoe on, gripping the ivy like a sailor in a gale. "Wrong room," she whispered down at him. He stopped on the gravel. It had been, up to that point, an entirely ordinary Tuesday. "Madam," he said, "you are 18 feet above a stone terrace." "I am aware of the terrace, thank you. It is the only part of the arrangement I have been able to give my full attention." She adjusted her grip. Something in her apron pocket clinked. "Would you be so good as to go away? You are making me self-conscious." "I am not going away." "Then would you be so good as to stop looking up?" "Also, no," said the Duke of Norhaven and moved directly beneath her and put his arms out. "Let go." "Certainly not. I do not know you. I am Norhaven." There was a pause up in the ivy. "Oh," said the young woman in a small voice, "that is very much worse." She was a slight thing, and the ivy was 200 years old and rotten at the root. And it gave way approximately 1.5 seconds later, and Peregrine caught her the way one catches a sack of meal thrown down from a loft, badly, with a great deal of noise, and staggering 3 steps backward into a stone urn. He set her on her feet at once and stepped back a full pace, and she straightened her cap, and they stood 2 yards apart on the terrace like a pair of duelists. A stoneware bottle rolled out her apron and came to rest against his boot. Peregrine picked it up. "Quince cordial." "Lady Ottoline Frayne cannot sleep without it," said the young woman, with enormous dignity. "I am her companion, Tamsin Quill. I arrived this afternoon. I have never been in this house before, and I would like to state for the record that 11:30 I went down the back stair for that bottle and came up a different one, which I now understand to have been the west stair, which I now further understand your under-butler locks at 11. Fawcett locks it at 11. "Fawcett," said Miss Quill, "locks it 11. So I turned into the first room I came to rather than be discovered wandering your corridors like a housebreaker, and the door shut behind me, and this—" She opened her fist, came off in my hand. On her palm lay a brass door handle. Peregrine looked at it. He had complained about the handle to his housekeeper for 14 months. "That is the blue guest room," he said. "It is the room in which I have just spent 40 minutes shouting politely into a keyhole. The window was the only remaining course. I did not know it gave onto." She stopped and went scarlet from throat to hairline. "Whose window is that?" "Mine. Your Grace, I was never inside your—" "I know exactly where you were," Peregrine said. "You were in the blue room which shares the porch roof, and you came along the ledge, and any man who says otherwise will answer to me." "Miss Quill, kindly stop apologizing. It is my house, my locked stair, my broken handle, and my ivy, and I have just been provided with the first interesting thing that has happened at Norhaven since the year 11. She looked at him then, properly for the first time, a small square-jawed face, freckles, a great deal of hair coming down on one side, and she began to laugh and clapped both hands over her mouth to stop it, and did not manage. Peregrine walked her round to the front door like a Christian, handed her the cordial, and went to bed. He discovered over the following days, in some trouble. Norhaven had 11 guests in it that week, gathered by his great-aunt Ottoline under the transparent pretence of the shooting, and Peregrine had spent 4 years being gathered at. He was 39, he was unmarried, and the county had made a project of him. He had learned to sit through a great deal of harp music with his face arranged. Miss Tamsin Quill did not play the harp. Miss Tamsin Quill sat behind Lady Ottoline's chair with a work-bag, refilled the old lady's cup before she asked, shouted the whole of the newspaper into a good ear every morning with excellent expression, and said almost nothing to anybody else. But on Wednesday he passed the library door and heard her reading aloud a leading article about the corn duties, and heard her stop and say, "That is nonsense, ma'am, he has counted the same twice," and heard his great-aunt cackle like a witch. On Thursday he came upon her in the stable yard giving her own bread and butter to his worst-tempered hunter, who took it off her palm like a lamb. On Friday at dinner, a portly gentleman named Mr. Gold declared that women had no head for figures, and Peregrine watched, with rising joy, as Miss Quill kept her eyes on her plate and said nothing at all, and as Lady Ottoline said loudly, "Tamsin, dear, what was the thing you said about his ship?" and as Miss Quill was obliged, going pink, to explain to the table exactly how Mr. Goll had counted the same tonnage twice, in 3 sentences with the arithmetic, and then apologized to him for it. Peregrine did not sleep especially well that night either. On Saturday he took the trouble to find out about her, rector's daughter from a parish 40 miles off, father dead 2 years. The living had gone to another man, as livings do, and the daughter had gone into service as a paid companion, as daughters do. £3 a quarter and her keep. On Sunday, Mrs. Wrensham told the whole drawing-room about the ivy. She did it beautifully. She had been at her window, she said, unable to sleep, poor creature, and had happened to look out, and had seen the most extraordinary thing, and of course she would not dream of repeating it, and then repeated it twice, with the window identified. The room went absolutely still. Peregrine, standing at the chimney-piece with a coffee cup, watched Tamsin Quill's face empty of colour and understood, with a cold clarity that surprised him, that this was not a piece of gossip. It was the end of her. A companion with a story attached to her does not get another place. She would be on the carrier's cart by Tuesday with a character her employer could not honestly write. He opened his mouth. His great-aunt Ottoline got there first. "Oh, that," said Lady Ottoline Frayne at the volume of the extremely deaf. "Yes, they are engaged to be married." "Peregrine, do stop skulking by the fire. Everyone has guessed." There was a silence of the kind that happens in a room when 11 people rearrange their entire understanding of the week. Peregrine had perhaps 2 seconds. He was aware of Mrs. Wrensham's face, and of Mr. Gall's, and of the sound of his own heart, and of a small figure by the window who had stopped breathing altogether. "We are," he said. That was all. He drank his coffee. And the drawing-room at Norhaven broke into the delighted, greedy noise of a great many people who have just been handed a piece of news worth 100 miles of carriage. He got to her at last in the passage outside, where she was standing with her back to the wall like a woman who has been shot. "Miss Quill, you must unsay it." "I will not, Your Grace." Her voice was perfectly steady and her hands were shaking. "You have known me 5 days. You have caught me falling out of a window and heard me be rude to a fat man about shipping. That is not a foundation for a marriage, it is a foundation for a farce, and by Christmas you will look across your own table at a rector's daughter with £3 a quarter, and you will remember that you did it in a drawing-room because a woman with a squint told a story about ivy." "Mrs. Wrensham does not squint. She does when she lies. Please unsay it. And what becomes of you?" Tamsin Quill lifted her chin. "I go home to my aunt at Ledbury and I take in mending and I am perfectly all right. And in 10 years nobody remembers." She met his eyes. "I would rather be poor and true than a duchess by accident. I have very little else left to be proud of, Your Grace. Kindly let me keep it." Peregrine, who had been fenced with by professionals for 20 years, found he had nothing whatever to say. She was gone at 6 the next morning on the carrier's cart, with a note for Lady Ottoline and no note for him at all. He went after her on the Thursday. It took him 3 days to get there, because he did the thing properly first, which was the only thing he could think of that might be believed. He went to Wexbridge and sat down with his own solicitor, and settled 400 a year on Miss Tamsin Quill of Ledbury, absolutely and irrevocably, hers whether she ever spoke to him again or not, with a clause that made it impossible for anyone, himself included, to take it back. Then he had the papers sent to her aunt's house by a separate rider so that they would arrive a day before he did. Then he had the brass handle mended. The aunt's cottage at Ledbury had a green door and a great deal of honeysuckle. Miss Quill opened it herself with flour to the elbows and went white. "You have made me a rich woman," she said. "It arrived yesterday. I have been sitting up all night trying to think how to send it back, and there is no way to do it," which I imagine was the point. It was entirely the point. "Why? So that when I ask you," Peregrine said, "you will be a woman with 400 a year of her own, refusing a duke from a position of some strength, and neither of us will ever have to wonder about it again." She stood in the doorway with the flower on her arms and did not say anything. He took the handle out of his pocket and held it out. "I have had this mended," he said. "It is the only door in Norhaven that would not open from the inside, and it is now the only one in the house that opens perfectly, and I have carried it about with me for 11 days like a lunatic." I am aware of how this began. I have been made thoroughly aware. I know that it is a ridiculous story, and that it will be told at every dinner table in the county for 30 years, and that some of them will always believe I was obliged. He drew a breath. I do not care. I was not obliged. I have been sitting up as late as you have, Tamsin, and it has nothing to do with Ivy. It is because you read the newspaper to a deaf old woman every morning with more expression than the House of Commons manages in a session. It is because my worst horse eats out of your hand. It is because you told a room full of people the truth about the shipping figures and then apologized for it, and I have been angry about that apology for a week and a half. It is because I have laughed 4 times since Tuesday and the previous total for the year was 1. He put the handle into her flowery palm and closed her fingers round it. I am not asking a companion. I am not asking a woman I compromised. I am asking Miss Tamsin Quill, of independent means, whether she will marry a dull man of 39 who has 9,000 acres and no conversation, and would like her at his breakfast table for the next 40 years. Tamsin looked down at the handle for a long moment. You are not dull, she said, and it is a very great deal of conversation for a man with none. Her voice cracked in the middle. Peregrine, I ran away because I thought I was a debt you were paying. You are the only thing in my life I have not been obliged to do. Then yes, she said, and burst into tears, and then, because she was who she was, added, and I should like it stated in the settlement that I was never in your bedchamber. It is stated, said the Duke of Norhaven, in 3 places, and my solicitor thinks I have run mad. They were married in her father's old church at Ledbury in the 2nd week of September, with the honeysuckle still out and Lady Ottlane Frayne roaring the responses a full beat ahead of everybody in a hat of remarkable size. Mrs. Wrensham was not invited, which Tamsin thought unkind and Peregrine thought insufficient. Mr. Gull was, and was seated beside a shipping agent, and had a very educational afternoon. The story got out, of course. It went round the county exactly as she had predicted, growing as it went, until in some versions there were 2 windows and a ladder and a bishop. The Duchess of Norhaven never denied a word of it. She had, she said, been caught red-handed with a bottle of quince cordial and a broken door handle, and any woman who married a duke by more conventional means had frankly had a duller time of it. The handle sits on the chimney-piece in the small parlour at Norhaven, on a little square of blue velvet, polished twice a week by a housemaid who has been told exactly why and thinks it is the best thing she has ever heard. And every year on the 10th of August, weather permitting, the Duke of Norhaven walks his wife out onto the terrace after dinner and stands with her beneath the window where the ivy has never quite grown back and offers her his arm and says the same foolish thing he said the first time. Let go.